There is a very particular kind of confidence that comes just before a very expensive mistake. It is not recklessness. Recklessness at least has energy to it. It is something quieter. It is the confidence of someone who has convinced himself that the plan is so obvious, so clean, so geometrically correct, that reality will have no choice but to cooperate. You have seen this before, maybe in a business, maybe in a relationship, maybe in someone who was absolutely certain the housing market could not go down. The tell is always the same. The certainty arrives before the evidence does. I mention this not because I am particularly interested in the psychology of overconfidence, but because it describes, with uncomfortable precision, the logic that produced the war currently unfolding in the Persian Gulf. And the evidence, as I record this, is now very much in, just not the evidence anyone was expecting. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated military campaign against Iran. The Trump administration called it Operation Epic Fury, a name that, whatever else you say about it, does not undersell the ambition. The stated objectives were three: destroy Iran's nuclear program, eliminate its military leadership, and force a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran had effectively closed to international shipping. Trump announced the operation in an 8-minute video posted to social media from Mar-a-Lago. He said, quote, "We're doing this not for now, we're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission." By the White House's own account, the operation killed the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei within the opening phase, destroyed roughly 85% of Iran's defense industrial base, and struck more than 2,000 targets over 38 days. CENTCOM issued a statement in April declaring, and I am reading this directly, that Iran's ballistic missile arsenal and production capacity had been raised. The bully of the Middle East, Trump announced on Truth Social, was dead. And so oil went to $103 a barrel, which was not, strictly speaking, the expected outcome. Before we get to the economics, it is worth being precise about the geography, because the geography is what makes all of this so structurally difficult to solve. The Strait of Hormuz is a waterway roughly 33 miles wide at its narrowest point, connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. Through it passes, on a normal day, approximately 20% of the world's oil supply, 20% of global oil, through a corridor the width of some American counties. Iran's position is right along the northern shore. When Iran decides to make the strait inconvenient, or, as it is now done, effectively dangerous, the consequences are not contained to any one country or any one market. They radiate. Shipping insurance rates go up, tankers reroute, refining schedules shift. And within days, not weeks, days, the price of fuel moves at the pump in Phoenix, in Chicago, in London, in Tokyo. The strait is not a Middle East problem. It is a global plumbing problem, and as of right now, the plumbing is badly disrupted. Iran closed the strait following Operation Epic Fury. CENTCOM has been fighting ever since to reopen it, deploying A-10 Thunderbolt jets against fast attack watercraft, Apache gunships to intercept one-way attack drones, and naval escorts for commercial vessels attempting to transit. As of this recording, CENTCOM insists the strait is open. Iran's Revolutionary Guard insists it is not. 2 oil tankers were attacked this week attempting to transit. Both sides are, of course, correct from their own perspective, which means neither side is particularly useful. West Texas Intermediate crude oil was at $67 a barrel on February 27th, 2026, the day before Operation Epic Fury. By mid-May, it had risen to $102.68. That is a 53% increase. In one policy cycle, gas prices followed. In 7 U.S. states, Alaska, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington, the price of regular unleaded crossed $5 a gallon. The largest increases were in Wisconsin, up 68.7%, Illinois, up 65.9%. At a gas station in Phoenix, Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona posted a photograph showing $6.49 per gallon. Domestic airfares in April 2026 were up 20.7% compared to the previous year. The average ticket rose from $385 to approximately $465, and the Consumer Price Index reached 3.3% on an annual basis, the highest level since May 2024. Trump's response, when asked whether these rising costs were a problem, was that they were, quote, a very small price to pay for U.S. and world safety and peace. You will note that he was not personally paying the price, but that is a separate conversation. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, which is the Federal Reserve's preferred measure, is now forecast to hit 4% by the end of 2026. The Fed's target is 2%. The gap between those two numbers is where the prospect of interest rate cuts goes to die, which means the war in Iran is now also the reason the Federal Reserve cannot do what Trump has repeatedly demanded it do: cut rates, loosen credit, juice the economy. One decision, multiple compounding consequences. That is actually quite impressive in its own way. And then, on Monday, June 9th, 2026, a U.S. Army AH-64 Apache helicopter went down near the Strait of Hormuz. Here is what we know with reasonable confidence. The Apache was on patrol, one of many Apache gunships the U.S. military has been using to intercept Iranian drones in the strait. It collided with an Iranian drone. The two pilots survived and were rescued in what CENTCOM described as the first known use of an unmanned sea drone, an autonomous rescue vessel, to recover U.S. military personnel. The pilots required medical attention. Here is what became considerably more complicated afterward. Trump went on Fox News and described, in real time, to a television correspondent, the drone lodging itself between the two pilots, the cockpit filling with heat, the aircraft on fire, the pilots landing it in the water. It was vivid. It was dramatic. Iranian officials responded that they had not targeted the helicopter deliberately, and that the incident was an accident, or possibly the result of the pilots operating in a hazardous zone they had no business being in. Apache, Iran's foreign minister, posted that foreign forces near Iranian territory are at, quote, constant risk from plane accidents or human errors. He then added helpfully, to reduce risk, the best solution is for them to leave. CENTCOM described the strikes it launched in response as self-defense strikes, proportional, in response to unjustified Iranian aggression. Then came a second wave, then a third, hitting Jask, Bandar Abbas, Chesham Island. Reports emerged that 2 residential water reservoirs had been struck, and Iran retaliated by targeting U.S. military bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, claiming 21 attacks across the region. Stock futures dropped. The S&P 500 was set to open down about 1%. The Nasdaq was tumbling. European markets fell. This is what a cycle of escalation looks like when it is operating inside a war that was already supposed to be over. Trump has, since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, promised that a deal with Iran was close. According to a count by CNN, as of this week, he has made that claim at least 38 times. 38. The most recent iteration came after attending an NBA Finals game, where he told reporters the deal was in, quote, the final throes, and would arrive in 2 or 3 days. This has been the pattern for 3 months. A deal is imminent. Then something happens. Then the deal is imminent again. Then something else happens. The core problem is structural. The U.S. wants Iran to surrender its highly enriched uranium stockpile, what is believed to be buried under the rubble of the strikes, and accept verification by international inspectors. Iran wants sanctions relief and the release of frozen assets before any final agreement. The U.S. has rejected that sequencing. Iran has rejected zero enrichment. Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, described the American terms as considerably tougher than anything in the original 2015 nuclear deal. Iran knows that. So does everyone at the table. These are not small gaps to bridge in 2 or 3 days. They are foundational disagreements about what the word deal means. Meanwhile, Qatari negotiators are reportedly shuttling between parties. Kalibaf, the Iranian parliamentary speaker, said this week that Trump's public remarks on negotiations contradicted the agreed-upon sections, whether that is a negotiating tactic or a genuine complaint. As I record this, nobody outside those rooms actually knows, which is, to be fair, how diplomacy is supposed to work. It is less reassuring when the president is simultaneously posting about Allah on Truth Social between rounds of strikes. Trump campaigned on one promise above all others. He would bring prices down. He would fix what Biden had broken. He would make groceries affordable, gas manageable, the economy, something ordinary Americans could recognize again. The Reuters/Ipsos poll released in April 2026 showed that 34% of Americans approve of Trump's overall performance. 22% approve of his handling of the cost of living. To put that in context, Biden left office with 29% approval on cost of living, a number Democrats spent years calling catastrophically low. Trump is now meaningfully below it. A Fox News poll conducted in May, not a poll from his critics, a Fox News poll, found that 60% of Americans oppose continued U.S. military involvement in Iran, even as most believe the U.S. is winning the war. The cost of living was cited as the top economic worry by 58% of respondents. Even a third of Republicans now disapprove of Trump's handling of the cost of living. A number that had been 27% in February jumped to 40% by late March. These are not marginal shifts within the statistical noise. These are the first signs of a base beginning to do math. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is being drawn down to keep pump prices from going higher still. 7.9 million barrels released in a single week, according to American Petroleum Institute data, in addition to commercial inventory drawdowns of 9.1 million barrels. Trump, it is worth noting, criticized Biden extensively for doing exactly this. The reserve exists for emergencies. It would appear we are now in one. So, what is actually happening here, and where does it go? The honest answer, as I record this, is that no one knows, including, I would argue, the people in charge of it. What we do know is this: Trump launched a war intended to produce leverage in nuclear negotiations. The leverage exists, the deal does not. He launched a war intended to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The strait is contested. He launched a war he said would eventually lower energy costs. Costs went up 53% in a matter of weeks and are forecast to remain above pre-war levels through the end of the year. And he is now in a fresh cycle of strikes and counterstrikes with an adversary that, having lost its supreme leader and most of its missile arsenal, apparently still has enough left to shoot down an Apache and launch 21 retaliatory attacks in a single night. None of this means the war was necessarily wrong to fight. That is a separate argument, and people of serious judgment disagree about it. What it does mean is that the specific theory of the case, that this would be quick, clean, cheap, and economically beneficial for the American household, has not survived contact with the actual war. The map was not the territory. It rarely is. The administration described Operation Epic Fury as complete in April. The president is currently ordering new strikes on Iranian power plants and bridges. Make of that what you will. The United States has, over the last several months, achieved something genuinely remarkable. It has made Iran simultaneously weaker militarily and more expensive to fight economically. For Americans, that is a difficult combination to engineer intentionally. You almost have to admire the architecture of it. I am Marcus Fenn. This is Borderlines, analysis from the edge. If this kind of thinking is worth something to you, subscribe now. The most consequential stories, as it turns out, tend to cost more than anyone budgeted.